With each episode of Tales of a Walking Dead being a standalone and self-contained story, what can we expect in episode 4? Will it bring back another character we know from before, or will it be someone completely new that we have never seen in any of the main entities surrounding the Walking Dead universe? If you'd like to find out, then join me for this short review video. In episode 4, titled Amy/Dr. Everett, we meet Anthony Edwards as Dr. Everett, who is playing a scientist and documentarian here, who has locked himself away in an area that is seldomly frequented by people because it's tough to reach, called the Dead Sector. There he is running some studies about the dead that he calls Homo Mortis, regarding a lot of stuff like behavior in a herd and other patterns. Because in his opinion, the dead are not just dead, they are also carrying over at least a little bit of personality from the person they once were. This is showcased very well with one of his subjects called Specimen 21, who later turned out to be a former colleague that he knew very well. For instance, he notices that Specimen 21 is killing animals along the way and then leaving them back for the rest of a herd to eat, basically playing the provider role and not digging in himself that much. Which is pretty much in line with what that person would have done in real life before he died. Well, of course only on a metaphorical level. His kinda quiet life is interrupted when Amy stumbles in his way. While there are apparently a lot of people close to the border to the Dead Sector who are collecting the zombies' heads as some kind of an object that is really valued in trading for reasons unknown, and in that way interfering with his studies because they kill Homo Mortis that he is studying, he is not happy to see her, expecting her to be one of those. Being a scientist and documentarian at heart, where the first rule is to never interfere, he almost would have stood by as she was in danger of getting bitten. The only reason he actually interfered is because she was close to killing Specimen 21 as he was getting close to her. Amy tells him that she is not part of those headhunter gangs and that she is part of a group that just wants to settle down in the Dead Sector because it seems to be a little bit quieter there than in other places. Not wanting to have anything to do with that, he is refusing to help her with whatever she wants. But since she is hurting due to the fact that she is eating poisonous berries, thinking they are safe to eat, and almost died from that, she forces her way into his life and into his house. While the two of them are getting a little bit closer, he is offering her to stay, but just on her own, to be groomed to take over his job because he's not getting any younger, while she is offering him to join her group, which he denies because he has work to do. How this all will play out, I will let you know in the spoiler zone at the end of this video, but for now let's get into the review part. The episode itself started with a little bit of a head scratcher for me, because one of the first scenes we see is Dr. Everett using a drone to film and survey the herd that he is watching. Because if I remember correctly, the global outbreak was 2010. So I was asking myself, was the drone technology readily available already at that point in time? But then I thought he is a professional documentarian, so maybe he has had access to that earlier and for a higher price, but it will very likely be very much in line with the technological timeline. But it still had me surprised a little bit there. I really like the idea of having someone showcased who is actually just observing and not really actually interfering, and being interested in seeing what the walkers are doing, and not in a way we have seen in other episodes or in other shows. Someone who is actually trying to study their patterns and just watches them in the wild and do not capture them and experiment on them. So that was a very nice concept in regards of him watching them as a new species. I also think that the concept of having a group of people collecting the heads of the dead is also interesting, though I would have been quite interested in finding out what they are doing with that. So either that will never come up again, or it will be popping up in another property or in a future episode of the series. I'm not sure, but for now I think it was quite disappointing to have that just as a throwaway information along the way and not digging deeper into the meaning of that. But again, I have no idea where this show and where the whole Walking Dead universe is supposed to be developing into over the next years. With so many spin-off shows already announced, I guess it is very likely that we might find out in one of those. I guess just following him would have been too boring for one episode, so they throw in someone else. And with the character of Amy, they tried to bring in a little bit of chaos and color into his life, I guess. But I guess what was supposed to come across as being a very simpatico character ended up being quite annoying because she really forces her way into his life in a way that was too aggressive. This all was not helping the very end of the episode, which I will address in the spoiler zone, but for this reason this episode never really clicked with me as it should have. And ultimately that resulted in me not really caring about what happens to her character at all. One quick call out before we get into the rating. I really think it was quite strange for myself to see Anthony Edwards in this role, because at first I didn't even recognize him, as he was wearing a hoodie and had a very grey beard. I knew him from so many movies in the past, and I really should have recognized him even with a beard, as I know him that way from his year-long stint at ER. But I also realized that I have never heard his voice in the original before, because I only ever saw him in a dubbed version. So that was the reason why even his voice never sounded familiar to me, and I never made the connection until I read his name on screen. So that was some kind of a surprise for me. But again, this is pretty much only applicable to me. But now let's get into the rating. With all that in mind that I just mentioned, I guess it all comes really down to the fact that I really enjoyed the setup, but the execution, especially how they have woven in Amy's storyline, was more annoying than anything else and resulted in me not really caring and also being a bit annoyed by this episode overall. For that reason I cannot really call this a good episode, but it was a nice one that was at least entertaining and something different from what we have seen before. So I'm scoring this with 6 out of 10 points, even though I would have wished, especially since Anthony Edwards was in this one, that I could have had scored it a little bit higher. But you should always stick with what you feel is right, and that is what I'm doing here. But now, if you don't want to get spoiled but enjoyed this video so far, please like it now before you leave. And if you are no subscriber yet, maybe consider to change that. By also hitting the notification bell, you will get a heads up for most of my new videos. If you don't mind spoilers or have already watched this episode, then please follow me into the spoiler zone. Well, to keep it short, Dr. Everett of course is so skilled already in reading patterns that he has pretty much already concluded that Amy's group is doomed due to the fact that a horde is moving their way and they would never be in time to stop it. Or maybe he could have if he really wanted to interfere, but again, he's a documentarian. So instead, without telling her, he tried to keep her with him so that she is safe, but she didn't want to have that. This ultimately ended in a way that she left and met up with her group, while the group was completely consumed by the herd of walkers. The episode ends with Dr. Everett finding her walking around as a zombie, which was, I guess, supposed to create some kind of a sad feeling in us, but as she was more annoying than anything else and you didn't care really about her character, it was just happening and nothing more. But the twist here was that after he has lost Specimen 21 before, he now makes Amy his new specimen to follow around. Have you seen the episode too? What do you think about Dr. Everett? Do you think he is a bad guy because he is just watching and not interfering? Or is it completely legitimate to be a studying person, just letting things play out without interfering? What did you think about Amy? Was she also more on the annoying side for you as well? Or did you really like her? Let me know in the comments. So much for now, see you next time and thanks for watching!